What if the scariest thing about a haunted house isn't the ghost, but the memory it refuses to let go of? Today's guest is an Emmy-nominated screenwriter and novelist who knows exactly how to make history bleed into the present. Her debut novel, Dearest, was a Barnes & Noble Best Horror Book of 2024, and she's written for hit shows like Big Shot and The Kicks. Now she's back with Turn Off the Light, a gothic horror novel that spans 400 years on the isolated eastern shore of Virginia. We dig into everything from quantum physics and sleep deprivation to the terrifying reality of being a, quote, woman of knowledge in the 1600s. This is the Dark Mind Podcast. If you enjoy the show, please support it by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Your support helps keep the dark conversation alive. So without further ado, I give you Jacquie Walters. Jacquie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on this 14th day of December 2025. I came across your work on Bookstagram and was expecting a good old-fashioned haunted house story, but I was really taken aback by how much more you delivered. You didn't just lean into the haunting, you layered it in foul play, toxic family dynamics, and even a touch of quantum physics, which pushes the book into the area of kind of full-on speculative fiction. So I was really impressed how it straddled worlds, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you for joining me on the show to discuss Turn Off the Light.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
So to give a brief synopsis, the setting takes place in the isolated marshlands of Virginia's eastern shore. Two women separated by 4 centuries find their fates bound together by a house that remembers everything. In the 1600s, there's a woman named Edith who is a healer, a woman of knowledge in a community that watches her every move. When shadows begin to move where they shouldn't and whispers creep through the dark, Edith becomes convinced that she has opened her door to the devil himself. And that is where the story really takes off. So the central premise of Turn Off the Light, as I kind of alluded to just now, involves 2 women, Edith and Claire, who are separated by 400 years who, quote, need each other. Often in a dual timeline horror, the past is just a prologue for the present. How did you structure the narrative so that the connection feels like a dialogue between centuries rather than just an echo?
That's a great question. Also, your voice is amazing. And I'm like, can he do a trailer for the book?
One woman,
fantastic.
1600s.
It's amazing. Okay, so that I love that question, especially because the process of writing this book, to be frank, was hell. You
opened your own door to hell.
Yes, exactly. So my debut came out in 2024, and I am kind of first and foremost a television writer. And I had been thinking about my debut, which is Dearest. I had been thinking about that story as a movie for a few years before I ever started writing it as a book. I wrote half the movie and then I was just too busy with TV stuff. But then the Writers Guild, we went on strike in 2023. And so I didn't have to, but I decided to pivot, and I was like, well, maybe this story I've been thinking of as a movie could be my debut novel, could be, because I'd always wanted to write a book. And so I wrote it very quickly. I wrote it in about 3 months because we were on strike. I knew we might not have that much time. So I made the sort of rookie mistake going into my second book thinking, oh, I can write a book in 3 months. No problem. And that was because I'd been thinking about that story for years, right? It had marinated in my mind. But this one, I really didn't know. I really had to write 3 full novels to get to this one. And I was discovering it as I was writing, which 0 stars, do not recommend. I hope I don't do that again. The first draft was a just completely different book. The second draft was much, much closer to this book, but it was all told in the present day. And there were mentions of Edith in the 1600s. And when I got on with my editor, she was like, this is great. Like, let's go through some notes. And I said, it's not what I want it to be. It's nothing special yet, but I think I know how to get it there. And it involves braiding in a whole second timeline from the 1600s. And this one's a little tough to talk about without spoilers, but, my sort of goal is like, I want to change the way people think about hauntings. And I just figured the best way to do that was to really show both perspectives. You have to show, not tell, right? The 1600s.
Gotcha. Well, Edith is watched for what she knows, not just what she does. What felt more dangerous to write, the supernatural threat or the community's hunger for certainty and scapegoats?
Definitely the community's hunger, this isn't really a spoiler, but, she's a woman in the 1600s who is a healer, and she knows a lot about medicinal plants, and she has cured people. And I think we all know that in that time, a lot of those women were seen as witches, essentially. But for some reason, a man could do it, and he was just the apothecary, and it was fine. But, she started to be seen as a witch. And I think we all have some version of that, even in the present day, of people thinking we're something we're not. But that's absolutely the scarier part for me. The sort of supernatural stuff is fun and mysterious and creepy, but like the true terror for me comes from the people that I love, or the people that I thought respected me, who now are like violating me to discover what I truly am. What might they do to me is way scarier.
Yeah. Well, the house doesn't just contain the horror, it participates. At what point does architecture stop being setting and start being character? And I don't want to give away too much, but I really liked the way how even, let's say, leftover blemishes to the house were connected over time.
Mm-hmm. I think in any haunted house story, the architecture has to be a character in and of itself, And I think with a book like this that did not start out as a haunted house story, but has ended up as one, my sort of goal in books, at least up until this point, and I think with my next one as well, is to take something that maybe we've seen before, and obviously we've all read many haunted house stories, but how do you turn it on its head, right? Like, how do you make it sort of significantly different, or make people look at it in a totally different way? And I think a big part of that for this one, we're both like trying to tiptoe around spoilers, but is, making the house is a sort of conduit for these things to happen.
Well, in your mind, what is the first boundary that breaks in the story? Sleep, belief, trust, or time? And why did you choose that as the opening, quote, crack?
Ooh, good question. Sleep, belief, trust. I mean, I think literally speaking, it does start with sleep. Claire, really both of them, but especially in the present day, she's returning back to her childhood home to help care for her dying father. and she hasn't been back here. This is kind of the classic trope that I think we all love. It's like she hasn't been back here since she essentially fled as a 20-year-old. And it's been, 15 years, and she's been largely avoiding it. And now she's back in her childhood home. And so the first thing to kind of go for her is sleep. She comes into it tired. She's, trekked her 4-year-old daughter through multiple flights and across the country from Los Angeles to get back to Virginia. And so she starts out tired, and then she's not able to get sleep. And so, as in my debut, Dearest, I love playing around with sleep and sleep deprivation. I think it's just, first of all, really relatable. I think, we all feel like we're living on the edge when we can't get the sleep we need. And I always like to play with the sort of, especially from the female perspective, that notion of questioning yourself, maybe before you even question what's going on around you, right? It's like that default of like, well, maybe I'm just kind of losing it, or maybe I just haven't gotten enough sleep. Maybe I'm imagining things, because I think especially as women, we do that a lot to ourselves.
Yeah, and sleep is a very liminal state, because you can just be straight up unconscious, or you can be in full-on REM sleep, or sleepwalking, sleep talking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then I was studying for one draft of this, there was a lot about like sleep hypnagogia. I think that's how you pronounce it. And that's when, when you're like, I think the most common experience of it is like when you're almost asleep and then you like jerk yourself awake. Like you imagine stepping off a curb or something, like you, and then your whole body jerks and you're awake. It's that state that's like right between sleeping and waking, where, people will report like seeing figures over their beds and all these strange things where you're like, okay, well, is it just the brain sort of stuck in this weird, in these weird brainwaves between sleep and waking, or is something happening? Are you more open? Are you more receptive in that time to something a little more supernatural? So that was another thing to play with here.
Yeah. I don't know. Just kind of a side note, not to go off in the weeds. I used to work shift work, so there would be a lot of nodding off, not on the job, but like, when I got home and I was trying to stay awake to reset my sleep schedule. And I don't know what it was, but when I would nod off and then just like kick back, it would give me like a rush of energy. Mm-hmm. I don't know. And I would be good for the rest of the day. It's almost like it was like a split second siesta that just, I don't know what's behind that, if that's just some weird thing that happens with me or not, but
I know. Well, I think it's like a shot of adrenaline. It's like a fight or flight thing, it's like your body's suddenly like, oh my gosh. And then, now you have this adrenaline like, oh yeah.
You're putting yourself into a vulnerable position. So wake up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's probably where it comes from.
Yeah. And it's funny how you were talking about how she hadn't been there in, what was it, 20 years, you said?
Yeah, like 15, 20 years. Yeah.
15, 20 years. It's funny how that is often in the storyline or the plot of a horror movie as well as a Hallmark movie.
Yes. That's so true.
It's so adaptable. You can use it for anything. Plug in.
Our childhoods are rife with things we can mine stories from, right?
Yeah. Well, so the novel uses the witch trial era as a backdrop, but Edith isn't just a victim. She's also a woman with secrets and agency. What was your strategy for making her both vulnerable but self-sufficient?
Yeah, so she has grown up on the shore, which is unusual for that time period. Pretty much every other woman, I'm trying to think, on the shore at that time in this story anyway, is from England, is from abroad. Her best friend is like essentially a mail order bride that the Virginia company brought in from London. And so she's led a very different life than most of the settlers that she's around, who grew up, in the city and across the ocean. She, I think, has had more exposure to the elements and she knows the land, she knows the creeks. And she's probably even like a lot of her healing theories and information and everything she's learned comes from her aunt. But, her aunt probably learned a lot of that from the natives. So she just has to me, self-sufficient is the exact right word. Even when she does get married, because that's just what you did, of course, she begins to feel, there's a line that's like, even when it first starts, it sort of feels like a corset that is just tightening around her. She's not used to that. Her mother died when she was young. She was essentially raised by her aunt and her father, but she had a very different kind of childhood from that would have been typical of the time. And so I think marriage is something that's not super comfortable for her. She also doesn't necessarily want to be a mother, which is another sort of point of contention within her own mind. And for that time period, of course, is not something she would tell anyone, probably. So I think even if there was no horror elements in the book, you're sort of setting Edith up for conflict by having her marry someone who wants a family and who wants the traditional lifestyle, because it's just not what she was built for.
Yeah. I got a lot of kind of the vibe from the movie The Witch.
Which one is that?
I know it's like, I think there's probably 90 movies called The Witch. I would know the one where I forget why they're leaving their village, but they go out to live in the woods where there, of course, is a witch, or actually what turns out to be a whole coven of witches. And she seduces the young boy.
Let me see. I might have seen this.
I'll tell you what, I'll just bring it up right now.
I'm like trying to remember.
Right here.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I saw it, but now that you're bringing it up, I'm like, I need to watch this because I love Anya.
Yeah, this, my God, but it was like period accurate dialect. So you better have the subtitles on because they are hard to understand, and you've got to really see it written to kind of suss, like in not always, but in some of the areas you've got to see it written out and to try to kind of suss out like, what are they saying right now? It's all English, but
Yeah.
So it's a great movie though, and it's one of those slow burns that drags it out so long where you're like, oh, this is kind of boring, and then boom, oh shit, I'm back in the game. What's happening?
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. It's really good.
Ooh, I'm gonna write that down.
I also wanted to ask you about the Virginia Shore itself. Am I looking at or Virginia Shore, East Shore? Mm-hmm. Is this what we're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is, again, the spoilers. This is why she's isolated, because she's in this general area.
Yes. So I think a lot of people don't even realize the Eastern Shore exists. It's essentially a peninsula that starts up in Maryland and dips down, crosses the Virginia border. So the northern part of it is the Maryland Eastern Shore, the southern part's the Virginia Eastern Shore. And then it's connected to the mainland of Virginia by, I think it's like 18-mile long bridge tunnel, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. So I grew up in Virginia Beach, and we would sometimes, just take the bridge over to the Eastern Shore, and it feels like a time capsule. Truly, it's like it's very quaint. I mean, it's a lovely place to go and like walk around and go for dinner, and there's like the little touristy section, but for the most part, it is a bit like run down. It's not very populated. It's a lot of like empty land, abandoned houses. So it in and of itself is such an interesting place. And I was sort of fascinated by this idea of like, well, who were the first people to live there? And, I'm not sure that any homes actually exist from that far back on the Eastern Shore, but, this is a fictional novel. So, and I certainly wouldn't say, I didn't grow up there or anything like that. So the setting is more my impressions of the place, if that makes sense. But I just find it a fascinating setting, even in the present day. It's like, it's so oddly isolated. It's really its own place.
So the isolation, anything else in particular that made you feel like it was the right breeding ground for, this particular type of dread?
That's a good question because the first drafts of this book were more like Central Virginia. Again, I grew up in Virginia, and I did not set my first book there, so I was like, I should set this one there. And I think there's just, you get the small townness of it, the sparsely populated nature of it, which is true for the past and the present. I mean, even when there were more settlers, in Jamestown and the main city and in Virginia proper, there were still very few people on the shore. I mean, if you think about it, at that time, getting back and forth was a trek. So there weren't very many landowners out there, very few, and they were separated by miles and miles. And, most of them couldn't even afford horses. So they'd have to, if you're walking to see your neighbor, you're walking 2 miles through the woods. And so, yeah, I think that just for somewhat obvious reasons, breeds its own sort of insanity. It would for me anyway.
Yeah. Well, self-trust crumbles for both women across timelines. What's the smallest lie we tell ourselves that lets fear rewrite our reality?
What's the smallest
I guess
lie?
That started off as a question about the book and ended up rather personal.
Well,
Gotcha.
Okay, so it's also like it's it's very psychological. So what's the smallest lie we tell ourselves? What is it that breeds fear, basically?
That basically lets fear rewrite our reality. Like for me personally, you're not intelligent enough to do that.
Yeah, it does all come back down to trusting the self. And mostly that breeds from insecurity. So whatever your insecurity is. And I think for Claire specifically, she's also got this added element of her older sister went missing when they were teenagers. Her sister was 18. And so she's returning to a place where, she never had answers about her sister. None of them did. And that grief that she's been hiding away for a long time is coming up to the surface now, being back in her childhood home. So I think that it's like the trusting the self plus the combination of all the stuff that she has let fester inside her, right? That she hasn't processed. And also the sort of hope, maybe this might somehow lead to some answers about her sister as well.
And I'm going to attempt to continue the trend of tiptoeing around spoilers, but rather than the haunting aspect of the story being a traditional supernatural origin, you gave it a modern day spin by injecting a little quantum physics. What inspired you to add that element?
Honestly, I was like, I literally think I was just in my house one day and I was like talking to my husband because he and I talk a lot about how time operates and, how time isn't linear and all the sort of various theories around time that I won't get into for spoilers. But I was like, what if hauntings are actually just this other thing? And I was like, God, that would be such a cool book. But it's so funny because that idea came to me while I was writing the last version of this. And I was like, well, that'll be my next book. And I was like, wait a minute. I have like subconsciously written a book that's perfect for that theory. So let's put it in here. Again, I think I love books that take something that is either unexplained in our world or scientifically confusing and gives it, like you said, it's not a supernatural explanation at all. It's actually quite scientific.
Super normal.
Yeah. And I think that's so cool to do that in books. There's another one I'm thinking of that's I think it's called The Strange Case of Jane O.
Okay.
I think that's what it's called. But it's about people who go into fugue states and forget they'll just lose like long stretches of time. They might even lose like a week or something because they go into a fugue state. And it's sort of this psychological anomaly that we can't really explain. We have a bunch of theories about why it might happen or what might trigger it, but we don't really know. And this book, without spoiling the book, gives it a really cool, you're like, oh, that could be what's happening. That is really a very scientific idea, but also feels really out there because we're looking for some like mechanism in the brain that's causing this. And this is like positing that this is the shape of our world, essentially. So highly recommend that book. I love that book.
Yeah, I had, have you ever heard of the Institute for Noetics? Noetic Science?
No.
I had the chief scientist, Dean Radin, on, and basically what the Institute studies is psi phenomena. So they do, they do experiments on telekinesis and, and it's not just a bunch of woo. I mean, they're actually using the scientific method. They're
right.
Yeah. So
yeah, I'm writing that down.
Check his books out.
I love that because I mean, this is like a whole other podcast, I feel like, but since in the last like year, a lot of this book was inspired by my daughter, who is now 5, but when she was 2, as soon as she could basically talk, I started realizing.
Her name Julia?
No, it's not. But the children in my books will age with my children because otherwise I don't know how to write kids. So some of the things that happen to the child in this book, some of the things she experiences are things my daughter actually did. So as soon as she could basically use her words, it became clear that she was seeing and interacting with spirits, whatever you want to call them, in our home. So there were times when like, one time she was napping and she started like hysterically crying and we went in and we eventually got it out of her that she was upset, not because someone was there, but she was upset because they left and she had been playing with them. So there are a lot of like stories like that. Or one time I was reading to her in bed and she looked up like in the corner of the room and just kind of like stopped listening to me. And she looked up and she was like, my house. It's my house. And I was like, oh, sweetie, is someone there? And she stared for like 30 more seconds. And then she's like, nope, not anymore.
Not anymore.
Like, okay. So we have a million stories like that. Yeah. But so she kind of brought this stuff to the forefront of my mind. And then a lot of other things have happened over the last year and a half. But I have actually pretty recently, like in the last few months, started like mediumship. And so I'm like channeling and speaking to people's loved ones on the other side, which talk about trust, because 99% of the time I think I'm losing my own mind, but then I'll say something like that. I'll get a message that I would have no way of, a memory that they shared or, a specific item that they had that I would have no way of knowing. And then it's like, okay, this is real. But it is like the ultimate test in trusting yourself, because I do feel crazy most of the time. But so I'm super fascinated to look up that guy. Because I am fascinated by mediumship and I love doing it, but I also love more than anything, like when they will hook someone up, and be looking at their brain waves while they're doing it and seeing the sort of science part behind it. Because really, like the more I study these things, the more you realize like none of it is actually woo woo. Like we've all been told, it's happening. It's real. And I don't know. I'm so excited by that. So.
Yeah. He worked on, have you ever heard of Project Stargate?
I have, but I'm not super familiar with.
The CIA was using people that were purported to be able to use remote viewing, but they were trying to use it for the government. Like instead of sending a spy overseas, somebody they could remote view overseas, basically. Yes. So, I mean, even the government was looking into it, and he wouldn't answer any questions about it because it's all still classified.
Yeah.
I was like, what if just tell me and you can kill me later? I don't care.
Yeah. That's
I just want to know.
Cool. It's so cool. And then they all try to gaslight us into thinking, no, we're not doing any of that. That's all crazy. That's woo woo, right? It's like, oh, it's fascinating.
Well, you kind of touched on this earlier with regards to the haunting of the house and the house itself, but just to get somewhat more detailed, ghost stories often hinge on the question, is it haunted? What made you more interested in what does it want and what does it cost to find out?
I think, again, if I'm going to tackle something like the haunted house genre, which there are just so many great stories, I think it's tougher and tougher to write one that's memorable. Like, how is it different from what we've seen before? So for me, the interesting question isn't, is it haunted? It's like, let's just start from there. And, by chapter 3, we're like, okay, it's probably haunted. So what do we do about that? Because the truth is, like, if this were happening to you in your life, what would you do? It's kind of like why I love any mystery stories, but I especially love like amateur detectives, like you and me. If something happened in our lives and we wanted to solve it, like I find that so much more interesting than a cop, for example, because what do everyday people do with the knowledge they have to figure out the mysteries of their own lives? I find that fascinating. So for this one, it's like, yeah, there's definitely something going on. So let's figure out what it is so that we can maybe try to stop it, right? I think that would be our natural inclination. Like, well, especially when we think of hauntings in the traditional sense, it's like, okay, well, there's something stuck here. How can I help free it, right? And then we twist that, and it's not exactly what's happening, but.
Well, again, maybe spoiler territory, but we'll see. In the story, there's, people accuse Edith of being a witch. How does the expression go? Because she's a woman of knowledge, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in the story, were there witches, quote unquote, that were women that were in league with the devil, or were they just, as I said, as the expression goes, women of knowledge?
I mean, I think they were women of knowledge, and I think that, if I existed back in the 1600s and told people I was communicating with the dead, they would probably say I was a witch as well, right? So it's not even just this notion of the devil. I think it's any notion of otherness. And I think it happens today as well. We just don't use terms like witches. We will say something like, oh, they're a hack, or they're swindling people. And there are, of course, those people out there. But I think for the most part, people are just scared by what they don't know. And it's much easier to then make that person the other, give them some sort of nefarious goal, and keep yourself in this safe box, as opposed to saying, well, let me explore that. Like, what if she really is talking to dead people? Like, what does that mean? What does that mean our world is? I have to now examine everything I thought I knew about the world I live in. And that's a scary, challenging thing to do. It's much easier to say, like, that person's insane, and there's also a time period where people just got locked up for that kind of stuff as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, writing a period piece in the 1600s requires a specific voice. How did you strip away modern psychology to write Edith's perspective authentically without making her feel alien to a modern reader?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did research in terms of, like, what was the day-to-day life at that time. But I think when it really came down to it, a lot of the things we face as women, I think, haven't really changed all that much through the centuries. So, her sort of struggling with, do I want to be married? Do I even want to be a mom? I have this thing I love doing, which is healing. And my husband just sees it as a hobby and wants me to keep house, right? A lot of these things are, in one version or another, something that women still struggle with today. So I think that was one thing that made it still feel modern. It's like, oh, I know that struggle, even if mine looks different, is in a different context, is maybe shinier because it's 400 years later. But we've all, sort of struggled with those kinds of feelings, men and women. And then in terms of the language, that it's an interesting question, because when you're writing a dual timeline like this, and one is so deep in the past and one is today, you don't want it to be so startling to the reader between chapters where it feels tonally so different. So you still have to sort of walk that edge. Like I know that I'm sure at times I use a word here and there in the past that maybe, I did for the most part try to make sure any sort of like unusual word I would look up, what year it started being used in dialogue, and even for the non-dialogue parts of the 1600s, because we're essentially, we're in third close, we're close in Edith's mind. But every now and then I let one slip in because I was like, this is a 2025 reader. And I think it's more important that the story feel cohesive and that it flows rather than being like so exactly correct. And so the dialogue as well, yes, it might not be. I mean, we frankly don't know how people spoke in the 1600s. There's no recordings or anything. So we have no way of knowing, as I've learned because I'm recording the audiobook, and I was doing a dialect session and he was like, look, we don't know what they sounded like, but we can guess. So let's work on the accent to the best of our knowledge kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, it was more important to me as the writer to get that tone and still have it feel like a nice, like one story, as opposed to, okay, like you're flipping back and forth between two different voices.
I don't know why when I was reading your book, one of the things that stuck out, I was like, man, I kind of want to make my own soap. But probably not. When I actually do it, it'd be probably a buttload of work. I'd be like, no, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes, I think it's like a multi-day process. It's not simple.
Yeah, it's not like body wash.
No.
One of the things though, and I don't know for sure because I don't really have any experience in boating or even, constructing boats or anything like that. But that's one of the things in the story that seemed like it was very technically accurate. Like you had some knowledge about, getting stuck on a sandbar and the way the weather reacted and all that. Are you just really good at making stuff up?
Well, yeah, that's a combination of research, especially in terms of building the boats, because I've never built boats, but also lived experience. I did grow up on the water and kayaking and boating and all of that. And I know that in the 1600s, if you grew up on the shore, you would have to have knowledge of that because that was the only way to leave the shore, or frankly, to get around. A lot of times they would take canoes, up the coast because it was easier than walking through the woods. So it's something that Edith had knowledge about. And then, yes, as you mentioned, her husband is a boat maker, which is probably the safest job to have on the shore at that time. Everyone needs a boat.
Recession proof.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense though. That's a clearer way of saying it. The boating and the making the boat aspects not only smacked of research, but also experience.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, across 400 years, what changes about fear and what doesn't when you compare what Edith risks socially versus what Claire risks psychologically? And I know we were just talking about how not much changes, just 400 years, it's a little shinier.
I think in terms of, like you said, these sort of primal instinct fears are very similar, but it definitely looks different for Claire in the present day and Edith in the past in terms of, like you said, what she risks. Edith, once she's married, she essentially her identity is folded into that of her husband. And so Claire has a lot more freedom in the present day. She's, and part of that is echoed in just her circumstances. She's a single mom, right? She's raising her kid alone. That's a very present day thing. And if Edith were to somehow get out of this marriage, she loses absolutely everything. She's starting from scratch, and including even the way, her reputation and the way people look at her. And so I think in terms of the sort of material world, there's a lot more at stake for Edith. And with Claire, I think her sort of driving force is her father. He's on the precipice of death, and she sort of realizes pretty quickly in the book that he's also being affected by the house. And I think a part of her thinks she can save him if she can figure out what's going on with the house. So that's sort of where her inherent stakes are, right? It's like, is my dad going to die before I can figure this out?
Gotcha. Well, it was a great book. Listeners at home, buy it, read it, and review it, and do not ruin it. There's so many authors are like, yeah, they review the book and they like break it down into the plot, all of the spoilers, all, you know.
I know.
Like,
don't read the
people.
reviews before you read the book. Yeah.
But I wanted to get into some of your other work. We've already talked about Dearest, which began as a screenplay before becoming a novel. And screenwriting relies entirely on external action, while novels live in internal thought. When you adapted the story, what was the hardest internal realization to articulate that you couldn't just show on camera?
Yeah, I think for me, even more than the internal thoughts, because I will say, I think I still write pretty cinematically, for better or worse. A lot of people who read my books are like, this felt like I was watching a movie. And I think that's, by design. It's also just my voice. I am used to being very efficient. Screenplays, like, you can't really have anything extra in there. There's no space for it. And every shot means something. So it's funny, I've talked to other authors and then other TV writers who also write books. And it seems to be a trend where most authors who do not write for the screen will overwrite their drafts. And then their sort of job in revision is to go in and say, okay, what can I cut? What can I cut? What can I cut? And all of us TV writers who also write books, our drafts usually come up short. And it's like, okay, now where do I go in and sort of add, like you're talking about, the meat of what's going on in her head and all of that. And I also always have the issue with my first drafts. People will be like, this is a great scene, but like, where are we? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so used to just saying like interior bathroom. And then like, the art director figures that out. Yeah. I don't need to describe what the bathroom looks like. So for me, setting is always, which is funny because, setting is so central to this one. So that was, even in the later drafts, my editor was still pushing me to be like, I need a little more of the house itself. Like I need to, and it's just setting, like describing setting in words does not come naturally to me because I just don't do that ever in screenwriting. So it's funny to see, the things that kind of bleed over. But for the most part, I think it's cool because I really do see my books still as scripts, really. You're going scene to scene. It's pretty economical. And it feels, for the most part, I think, like you're watching something rather than reading something.
Gotcha. Well, one of the ways horror heals is by facing vulnerability. How did writing Dearest during the Writers Guild strike test that idea in your own life?
Oh, well, Dearest is, a psychological thriller / horror about postpartum psychosis. And I was, it came to me when I was freshly postpartum.
Oh,
and,
so no, you didn't even, not even concerned with the strike.
No, we're working through some deeper things here.
Yeah.
So I fortunately never had postpartum psychosis. That's, like 1% of the population or something. But I did struggle with anxiety, major anxiety, and intrusive thoughts and all of that. So a lot of the book, even the first quarter, is like just my experience. And I think one of the things that's been so validating is having people respond to the book like, I feel like I'm reading my diary from that time. Like I don't even know if I could write that book as well now as I did 2 years ago, because it's just, the fresher that was, the more visceral it came through in the writing. And I think when I was going through all of that, there were a couple of big news stories at the time about, mothers who had committed horrible acts killed their children. There was a really high profile one at the time where she killed all 3 of her children and then she survived. And I just remember like scrolling comments on these articles of people saying like what a monster she is. And look, the definition of horror, like there's nothing more horrific than the idea of a mother harming their child. That's the opposite of nature. It's exactly what, like, there's just nothing scarier than that. Something that defies nature so much. But I was thinking, like, kind of coming more from the perspective of not being in your right head. I was like, gosh, I just imagine that mom waking up in the hospital, coming out of her psychosis and being told what she did and living with that. I mean, you could, do whatever you want to me at that point. Throw me in jail, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to be punishing myself way more than anyone else could punish me. And so I was just thinking, like, how do you get people to see it from that perspective? Like, how do you really put someone in the mind of somebody who is struggling with this? And one quote that I read from a psychologist at the time said, look, 99% of these women that go through this and that harm their children, when they're in psychosis, do not believe they're harming their child. They think they're saving them, right? So it's like, oh, I have, the devil is here. I have to save my child by doing X, Y, and Z. And that was just like, oh my gosh, to me, that's the definition of horror. It's like the fine line between destroying something and saving it. And then within your own mind, not knowing which is what's up and what's down. So I thought, well, horror is a great way to, I don't know how many people are going to be like, ooh, I want to read a book about postpartum psychosis. But if you say, this is a ghost story wrapped up in like psychology, unreliable narrator, all of that, then you get people talking about the thing after they've enjoyed the sort of entertaining story of it. It's like, oh, wow, that actually is what it would feel like to be in that person's head, and maybe have a little bit more empathy for the women that have gone through that.
Yeah. And it can be really hard to treat too. I was a firefighter for 25 years and spent a lot of time on the ambulance. And I remember this one woman in particular, we were taking her to the emergency room for postpartum or suicidal ideation, but secondary to postpartum depression. And they had put her on hormones to level that out. But one of the possible side effects of hormones is blood clots. And I think she had the blood clot that gets in your lungs, pulmonary embolism. And so she couldn't be on those. So they had her on SSRI antidepressants, and those weren't working for shit. So,
oh my gosh,
it's.
Yeah. And the woman that I was just referring to who was in the news a couple of years ago was the same sort of story. I think she was on like a cocktail of like 4 or 5 different medications because they couldn't figure out what was working and what wasn't. And yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's awful. It's awful. Yeah. But I was like, well, that's a horror story, if nothing else,
Yeah. Well, aside from horror, you've written for comedies like, and I hope I'm getting these right, Abby's and Big Shot?
Yeah.
Okay. Comedy and horror, I know from personal experience as well, too. I tried my hand at stand-up for about 3 months, and it was a fun time, but the first time you bomb on stage is horrific, so I didn't do it again.
Yeah.
But I know from personal experience that comedy and both horror rely on rhythm, tension, and release. Do you use the same muscle to land a joke as you do to land a scare?
I think so. I don't know that I've ever thought of it that way, but I think you do. And that's like a beautiful way of looking at it. I do think there's so many similarities. Like they're very, it's genre in a sense, right? So like heightened realism comedy is also heightened realism. Anything that's not, just living in that middle ground is going to require sort of some of the same rules, right? Like the build up and even like the 3 beats, like with the joke, you want to hit it 3 times. A lot of that stuff is the same. I started in comedy. And I I moved to Los Angeles to pursue acting, and was doing like sketch comedy and improv. And then that went into the writing of comedy, and
Did you ever do the Groundlings?
I did not, but I love
Okay.
Groundlings. I did UCB and Second City, so I did the others.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think I was good enough improv to do Groundlings. Those people, they're amazing.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you. Isn't Second City pretty much right there with
it? I mean, it is. I was doing sketch. I feel like Groundlings is, I guess they're also known for their sketch. It's definitely, yeah, and UCB is up there as well. I just I wasn't like a career improv person or anything like that, but I thought it was fun, and it was very informative on the writing side of things. But sort of parallel tracks as I'm writing on, a multicam comedy, which was fun because that brought me back to my theater roots, because I grew up doing theater, and multicams are shot live. And so, if a joke doesn't land, it's like all the writers huddle together and it's like, okay, what are we going to try next? And you're thinking of jokes on the fly. So that's really fun. Also kind of terrifying, but fun. And at the same time, I was like, I want to write a novel. I've wanted to write books. I think I've just been an avid reader since I was tiny. I've always had a book in my hand. And I'm not sure, I didn't grow up thinking I wanted to write books, but I think it kind of hit me as I was writing TV. I was like, I want to write a book. That sounds cool, also because it's so different from writing TV. I mean, they could not be more different. Like, TV is the most collaborative. There's a million cooks in the kitchen, a lot of red tape, it's like and then a book it's just you and the computer, and it either happens or it doesn't. It's totally on you. But there's no production budget, which is super fun.
Hell yeah.
So
the most economical cinematic vision.
Yes, exactly. So at the same time, I applied for and got into the Stanford novel writing program, which was like a 2-year remote program, all online. And that was fantastic. Built an amazing community. But the funny thing is, it's Stanford. And so most of the students were writing the next great American novel, and I'm like, I want to write the next Gone Girl. I grew up reading mysteries and thrillers. And even though I was doing comedy and TV, I realized through doing this program and working on my novel that I was like, wait a minute, I go into these TV meetings and I talk to comedy executives about all of the dark crime thrillers, from Iceland, these obscure shows on Netflix. And we are connecting over those kinds of shows. That's what I enjoy watching. That's really, I think, my bread and butter. What I'm good at is mystery and story. So even in the comedy rooms, I wasn't the joke person, no one was turning to me to be like, we need a button for the scene. What is it? I was the plot person, and always, if there is a plot issue, I can figure that out. That's my sort of strength in the room. So, taking that into mystery, it's amping it up. It's all about the plot, right? And that's what was fun for me. But that's kind of when I made that transition after Abby's, and then I did Big Shot. I was like, I think I need to be writing mysteries on the TV side too. And so then I switched over. So now I'm mostly doing 1 hour, drama, mystery, crime, serial killer type shows. Been all over the place.
Do you remember the first novel you read?
Oh, I don't know what the first one was. I grew up reading Nancy Drew. I still have all the original yellow, I have a whole shelf of my bookshelf is dedicated to the Nancy Drew collection. So that was probably one of the earliest ones. Nancy Drew, I loved the Goosebumps books, the Choose Your Own Adventure books. This is so fun to think about, actually, because I haven't, Roald Dahl. I loved all the Roald Dahl books. And then as I got older, I was very into, I loved Harry Potter. I was the Harry Potter generation. It came out, I grew up with Harry basically at the same age as Harry. And then I loved like The Golden Compass was one of my favorites when I was young. And then I also love Jodi Picoult, and she writes like legal thrillers, really. I mean, they're very character driven, but she was a lawyer, so all of hers are sort of focused on a trial of some kind, which I loved. So I was just like eating these books up. Yeah, but Goosebumps, I forgot about the Goosebumps books. I loved those.
Well, it's funny that you brought up legal thrillers, because I discovered prose by accident. My mom was very religious, or still is actually. And, we weren't allowed to watch R-rated movies. And The Client, which I can't even, that may have just been PG-13. I can't remember. John Grisham's, based on John Grisham's novel, was out, and I wanted to see it, but of course couldn't. And we were in the airport going to visit family, and you know how they have best-selling novels
in
those stores.
Yeah.
It had the movie poster on the book. So I was like, oh, this is like my Batman movie cards that I collect. It'll just tell the story of the movie. And my mom was down with me reading anything almost,
Right.
She said, oh yeah, reading is good. Doesn't matter what it is. So I was like, it was a clever hack. And then, but it's a novel.
It's a novel.
It's a legal thriller written by a former prosecutor. So I'm just like, how does he do this?
Yes.
Is this what all the books are like? Because I could never understand why people would buy these thick books and voluntarily read them. I was like,
Right.
I don't even want to do this for school, Yeah.
I hear you. Are you an audiobook person nowadays?
No, I can't focus. My mind wanders.
Yeah.
I have to be like tethered to the page.
I get that.
My
I get
ADD
that.
will not allow it.
Yes.
Well, in developing projects for TV, how do you think about fear differently when it has to survive episode breaks, seasons, and network notes? I feel a story coming on.
No,
little resentment,
just, network notes. Oh, they're so fun. That's a good question. I definitely build, but it's funny because I do this with novels too. I definitely build to, when I'm thinking about a story for screen, I'm thinking about what are the cliffhangers, right? So what's my act 3 out? What's my act 2 out? I typically think in 3 acts. I mean, stories are meant to be told in 3 acts. It's crazy that they make 5 commercial breaks and you have to do it in 5 acts is insane. But I think of the stories in 3 acts, and I do that with books too. I will say, as I'm sort of roughly outlining, in my mind, I'll be like, okay, let's say it's about 30 chapters. I don't know until I'm writing it, but that means, roughly the first 10, 15 chapters are act 1, the next 10 chapters, act 2, and then what's left is act 3. And so I think about what are my act breaks. And I think that helps to keep the story really interesting and building towards something. And one of my favorite things, I remember reading How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I love that book. And I remember I was reading it on Kindle, and something insane happened in the book. And I was like, I must be almost done. And I looked at the percentage and I was at 60%. And I was like, where is he going from here? So I love when a book does that. So sometimes I'll think of the story and I'll be like, okay, what's the end? Okay. Now what if I make that ending happen at 70%? What could go even beyond that? So that's sort of the challenge I put to myself, because I love when I'm reading a book and I think, oh my God, how are we still going to go? Where do we go from here? And I don't want to spoil How to Sell a Haunted House, but there's something that happens where you're like, what? Where do we this insane thing just happened? How can he possibly beat that? And then he does, because that book's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of piggybacking off of that, when you're building suspense, what's your personal test for whether a scene has genuine dread versus just loudness? And what do you look for on the page?
I like a bit of both. I think the loudness needs to be earned. So often I think that dread is sort of the price you're paying. It's sort of like you're putting in your earning, to get to the loud moment.
The loud is the interest earned.
Yeah, exactly. It can't feel like it's totally just for shock value. Like it still needs to serve story. I mean, at the end of the day, everything has to serve story. And I think that's, again, an advantage coming from TV and film, because you do have to be so economical. And books, you don't have to be, I think we've all read plenty of books where we're like, that was good, but they could have cut like 20% of it out, right? Like it was too long. Like it was just, and I think that's happening more and more. I feel as a reader that that's happening more and more, where I'm like, okay, especially with more established writers, where I'm like, I feel like their editor is letting them get away with this because this was like 30% longer than it needed to be. And we just don't have that luxury in TV or film. So I am not used to sort of like floundering in that. But I think, again, anything that happens, whether it be like something creepy, something mysterious, something loud and gory and insane, it all still has to serve the story. Otherwise, no, you can't have it in there. It's cheating.
Well, we've talked quite a bit about it in the beginning of the show. Would you like to read a passage from your newest book?
Sure.
Turn off the light.
Yes, turn off the light. So this is from chapter 2, which is the first chapter in the present day. And as a reminder, it's Claire has returned home to care for her father, who's dying. He has quite advanced dementia at this point. And she's gotten home late at night. He was asleep, and it was the sort of thing where it's like, okay, we'll see Dad in the morning. So we'll start. This is the very end of the second chapter. Despite the long day, Claire is alert. A nagging voice tells her she cannot go to sleep without seeing her father, without at least laying eyes on him. So she rolls gingerly from bed and pads through the playroom, down the hall, past Tilly's and Gabby's rooms, to the front swooping staircase that leads downstairs. Her father's bedroom is brighter than she anticipated. The curtains on the windows that overlook the front yard are drawn open so the moonlight spills in freely. Her father lies in the king-size bed that sits against the back wall. Claire wrinkles her nose. The room smells like a hospital, antiseptic chemicals mixing with stale air, death's favorite perfume. She stands at the end of the bed, careful not to bump it, and watches her father. She can't make out the details of his face in the dimness, but she is struck by how small his frame appears on the large mattress, how he is swallowed by the fluffy duvet. And then, the covers move forcefully, right where she imagines his belly must be, like his arms are flailing under there. She hears a click, 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 and realizes he is clenching and unclenching his jaw. Bursts of air escape through his lips and fits. His head jerks from side to side. Is he having a bad dream? Claire considers placing her hands on his feet to calm him, but then she worries that will wake him and make it worse. She steps closer and stands over him dumbly, her eyes frantically scanning his covered body. Should she get Tilly? Her father whimpers, his eyes still closed, his brows furrowed together in stress. Claire steps to the head of his bed, her back to the windows, her body casting a shadow over her father's face. He winces, clearly in pain. She holds her hands above his chest, is just about to lay her palms there to calm him. But then he goes completely still, limp, his body a slack, empty sack. The jarring difference between 2 seconds ago and now is chilling. Claire feels uneasy. She thinks about checking his pulse, but finally sees the comforter move again in a steady, breathing rhythm. She looks around the room once more. Nothing has physically changed, but the near darkness now carries an eerie weight. The stale air is suffocating, winding its way around her neck, pushing her toward the door with a warning. You are not wanted here.
Very nice. Yeah, you're working on the audiobook, right?
Yeah, so I recorded all the present day chapters last week, and then I'm going to record the past chapters in January after the holidays. And I did the audiobook for Dearest as well. It's really fun. So since I initially moved out here to pursue acting, I said early on in the process with Dearest, I was like, I would love to do the audiobook if possible, and also I knew, I was like, look, if there's some opportunity or it doesn't make sense for me and marketing, whatever, like that's fine, but I would like to do it. And my producer was so sweet, the audio producer. She sent over a bunch of auditions when it was time to get all of our ducks in a row for the audiobook. She sent over a bunch of people's auditions to get my input. And then it was sort of like, P.S. I hear you might be interested, like, you just send over a sample. I think she was like, okay, yeah, an author thinks, she can. She was like, oh, you're great.
This
yeah,
author's got some hubris.
Yeah, exactly. So then she heard so I tell people, yes, I did have to audition. And then for the second one, it's fun because I have all these different accents and I'm sure people will flay me for them, but what can you do? It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got a great voice for specifically Gothic. You remind me of a voice actor. You ever heard of Jennifer Pickens?
No.
She did the audiobook for a guy that I've had on a few times, Blaine Daigle. I think it's still his latest, Ashes of August Manor. Okay. And it's actually funny. The plot involves a man on hospice.
Oh,
and it's a woman that goes to this real rural area to take care of him. She gets hired, and she's kind of got the same, I don't know how to describe it, kind of a honeyed, syrupy kind of, nice flowing voice that just really resonates really well with a reading, Gothic or Southern Gothic. So
thank you. It's so fun.
Welcome.
I mean, it's also exhausting. I like hats off to people who do that non-stop.
I've done a few.
You have a great voice. Yeah, I'm surprised. I was going to say you must have recorded some audiobooks because you have a great voice.
Just a few.
Yeah, but it's. I mean, it's very tiring. It's like for 6 hours, a day, and you like can't move because the mic picks up every noise, and you're.
Well, that's where I'm lucky is I produce them myself. So I know what I can do and what I can't get rid of.
Right. Exactly. So,
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I know you're a busy woman. So last question. What is the life of Jacquie Walters like outside of writing?
Oh, gosh. Well, I have 2 small children, so that's mostly what it's like. I have a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. And my husband is Italian, so we try to spend a good amount of time in Italy. So, we'll be there for 3 weeks over the holidays, and we usually spend like a month over the summer. And so, it's like wrangling my 2 children. And these days, it's a lot of pitching. I'm out with a couple of TV shows at the moment, so it's a lot of like performing, pitching, sales pitches by day, and then a lot of like reading. And I've probably seen The Grinch about 422 times this year alone because my children want to watch it every day. So that's the glamorous life of Jacquie Walters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Jacquie, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for the kind words about the book. It really does mean a lot. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug, reiterate, or let your readers, and I suppose viewers, know about?
I'd love for everyone to check out Send Me a Book on Instagram. So that's a program or community I started that is authentic author recommendations for other books. So it's like your favorite authors, what are they currently reading? And they plug the book and then I give it away. So I'm giving away a lot of free books over there. And it's really just a place for authors and readers to come together and to find books off the beaten path, right? Because I think we can all see all the bestseller lists and the same books come up and up again and again. And so it's fun to see like, okay, well, what's this author that I love? What are they reading? So it's all authentic recommendations, nothing sponsored, and just like a nice community and free books. So Send Me a Book on Instagram.
Nice. All right. Well, listeners at home, all those links are in the description. And Jackie, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest authors and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.